Now you're lowering the cortisol and the insulin together, and that is even a more powerful, like a 1-2 punch on eliminating and not causing a resupply of belly fat. Hi, welcome to the Judy Terrell Show, where I explore topics intended to optimize every body 50, 60, 70, and above. Hi, everybody, and welcome to your second 50, and you're joining me in episode number 2 of my 6-part series on how to manage the new operating systems in a post-menopausal female's body. All right. As I said in the first episode, much of what I see online with influencers and podcasts, all are addressing perimenopause and the symptoms of the erraticness of estrogen as it's doing its dance of death down into postmenopause, and all the symptoms that are very difficult to manage because they're erratic and you don't know what to expect. The regular cycle is now not regular. The flow is different. Hot flashes come out of nowhere. Moodiness comes out of nowhere. Sugar cravings comes out of nowhere. All sorts of things that make it very difficult to manage perimenopause. And so, yes, a lot of information out about that, but not as much information, as far as I can see, available for when you're in postmenopause. Now, you're in a new operating system. You've made it through the earlier years of your life with the cycles of your sex hormones. You made it through the erratic stage of the perimenopause. And now you're in postmenopause and you're 1 year, 5 years into it, and you still kind of haven't figured out what the new operating system is, or you think you have, but using old, habits and information to try and manage them, and it's not working. All right. So that's what this series is about. I hit episode number 1. This is episode number 2. There's 6 to this series, and you would do yourself a favor to listen to all 6, because each one is addressing a very challenging, new way of being for your body, and you need to know how to manage it from now till you pass from this realm, because you're not going to have another menopause, okay? So the new operating system, what you have to manage now, once you learn how to manage it, you got it, okay? All right, so that said, what I'm talking about in this episode is very, very distressing to a lot of women, and that is the belly fat, all right? The accumulation of extra fat in the abdominal area, the belly area, and even for women who never put weight on in that area, they were more hippie and thighy. Maybe they still are now, but now they're noticing that it's going into their belly, and many of the women that had flatter abdominals when they were younger are very distressed by that, because that was their claim. This is the part of their body they felt proud of, and now it's a hanging mass, right? And then women who have always had that, now is exacerbated, and nobody's happy about it, all right? So now, one thing I'm going to say is that so extra energy going into your system is going to get stored as fat, all right? And men, as you all know, tended to put it on their bellies, where women would tend to put it on their hips and thighs, for the most part, when we were younger. And that is because extra body fat is going to be sex hormone driven. What that means is that there's a sex hormone kind of pattern, and testosterone will drive it towards the abdominal area, and estrogen tended to put more of it into the hips and thighs. Well, now, as postmenopausal females, because our estrogen is now tanked, but our testosterone has stayed the same, we now are going to put on body fat in a pattern that is more male-oriented, because we have more closer to a male sex hormone balance, because we're low in estrogen and progesterone now. So if we're having extra energy coming into our system, it's going to now get driven by testosterone towards the belly, all right? So that's why, for women like, why is this happening to me now? I never had this for my life. That's why. All right, now, you don't have to put on belly fat. That's a mixture of several things coming together as the perfect storm when you're a postmenopausal female. So number 1 is, if you are eating over, the calorie intake that you're burning, fat's going to have to get stored. And because of this hormone mix that you're in right now, it's going to go towards the belly. Now, that said, that's one factor. There are 2 other, and we can't control the change of hormones. That's kind of our state now. But there's two other hormones that are involved in belly fat, and that they are cortisol and insulin. All right. So when you have higher testosterone, lower estrogen, and then you have high cortisol and high insulin, that is the perfect storm for belly fat. All right. So let's talk about cortisol and insulin. So cortisol, as we all know, is the stress hormone. Our bodies will produce cortisol under stress, and that cortisol does a whole mess of things. Increase of cholesterol, raises the heart rate, dumps sugar into the blood. All of these things were, from an evolutionary point of view, what we needed, because when we were stressed, when we were primitive human beings, is we had to run away from a wild animal, or we had to get out of the elements where there's a storm brewing or whatever. And we needed to be able to have a physical output. So all those things I just mentioned were an asset when you had to be physical. But now in our current, 2023, which is when I'm filming this, we're stressed because of a family issue or world politics, or, we're late with a deadline, or we're stopped at a red light and then another red light and another red light, or we're worried and perseverating over something. And there's no physical output to be had, but our bodies are producing from cortisol a whole cascade of things, because from an evolutionary point of view, that's what the body has been kind of genetically primed to do. All right. So now when you've got a high cortisol and there's no physical output, and then the high cortisol combined with testosterone and low estrogen is going to be two factors now that are going to be driving the extra calories that you're intaking to the belly. The third one, and all of these kind of go together in the perfect storm that affects belly fat, is insulin. All right. Insulin, we know, is the hormone that's secreted when you eat, so that when the blood sugar rises from the food digesting, insulin's produced to pull the blood sugar out of the blood and bring it into the working muscles, or store into the liver, or store it as fat, drive it towards storage of fat, and then shut off the hunger mechanism, because it's got the signal that we've got enough sugar now in the blood. It's actually high and we don't need any more. All right. Now, when insulin is running high chronically, like for extended periods of time, then high insulin with high cortisol, high stress, in a postmenopausal female sex hormone balance is the three things that are going to drive that extra weight, that extra energy, to be stored as fat and stored in the abdominal area. All right. Now, we can have, of the three things I just told you about that influence belly fat, the one that we have the most direct effect over is that insulin. Okay. And how we have a direct effect over it is by what we are choosing to eat. All right. So now, as a younger female, what boosts the blood sugar up? Let me go back. As any age, I am so excited to announce your second 50.life. I have been working in the fitness industry with individuals, both men and women, over 50 years old for 42 years, and really specialized in the last 10 on over 50. I'm over 50 myself by a long shot. And I've helped literally thousands of men and women both to lose the extra body fat that they gain in the second half of their life, to feel better in their own bodies energetically. I have helped people to reverse and eliminate health problems, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, pre-diabetes, symptoms of menopause, to name just a few. On this platform, you will have access to an entire body of resources, exercise videos, mini courses, eating plans that are specially designed for over 50 men and women, because there's special needs for our demographic. And in addition to the virtual resources that you'll have access to if you join at any time that you'd like, you also have access to me for one-on-one coaching through a group coach call every month. So you can bring your specifics and we can address those, as you're also getting information that is specific to the over 50 population. 50s, 60s, 70s, and now 80s is the demographic that I'm working with. So it's your second 50.life, YOURSECOND 50.life. Go check it out. It might be the the single best thing that you've looked at like in your second 50s. Blood sugar goes up when you're eating carbohydrates. Protein goes up when you're eating amino acids in the blood go up when you're eating protein. Fatty acids and glycerol go up when you're eating fats. But what brings the blood sugar up is carbohydrate. And that's not a bad thing. We need to have blood sugar. There's a certain amount that we need to keep homeostasis. I'm not saying blood sugar up is bad, but there's a range that you want to stay within. All right. So now the carbs are what are going to be most affecting that blood sugar level. And the blood sugar is going to be what affects insulin. All right. So as postmenopausal females, we have to do a couple things when it comes to the eating. All right. And that is, you don't want to cut the carbs down to zero. That's the number one thing that I have, the major flaw that a high percentage of my postmenopausal females come to me for help with the reduction of the body fat, and they will tell me what they're doing for their eating. And most of the time they're trying to cut the carbs out, the starchy carbs. They'll eat vegetables, they'll eat fruit, but they're not eating potato or beans or rice or, sweet potatoes or whatever. They're trying to minimize that. Just eat the lower starch vegetables. That is a recipe for a disaster for another reason. I'm not going to get into that. All I'm going to tell you that is too high is not good, but too low is not good when it comes to the carbs. All right. Now, it's not even the high and the low is going to be affected by the carbs that you're choosing. You need to eat some starchy carbs, okay? But the choice of starchy carbs, and this is the main, message of this episode. When we were younger women, we could eat starchy carbs that were more processed, that were, wheat flour or gluten-free, flours, pastas made from beans that were made into a flour, things that we're, cookies, breads, bagels, muffins, some pizza, we could eat more of the foods that are the carbs that are turned into flour from another food and then made into a food, So flour-based, any type of flour that's made from a carb, all right, as a postmenopausal female is going to have, you are less able to manage that increase of blood sugar, and then that raises insulin. And if you're doing that too often or consistently, you become insulin resistant, which means the insulin is up high, but your body's not really hearing it. But you've got a high insulin and then high cortisol because we're all stressed to the, wazoo. We're marinating in cortisol. In a postmenopausal female body of the sex hormones, you're going to put belly fat on. All right. So the insulin being high is a result of choosing things that are shooting the blood sugar up too high. And those things are your flour foods, things made from a carbohydrate into a flour. And so what we have to do is, I'm not saying you're never going to eat flour foods, but if you are going to eat flour foods, you got to make sure it's 100% whole grain. All right. So 100% whole wheat flour, not made with whole wheat flour. All right. Or white flour, not gluten-free flour made from white rice or potato flour or sorghum flour, anything that is a flour that is not a whole grain or whole food. You want to minimize. You can eat brown rice, but you don't want to have a brown rice flour or a white rice flour and a gluten-free cracker. And that's one example of what women are coming to me with. They're cutting out the gluten because they think inflammation's helping to cause this belly fat, but yet they're now eating a gluten-free white flour cracker, and they're kicking that blood sugar up, kicking that insulin up, and they're not making any headway on that belly fat. All right. You would be better off to slice up a sweet potato that's been cooked and having little rounds and then using that as a cracker, for instance, because that's a whole food. All right. You'd be better off using a product like Mary's Gone Crackers, these seed and grain crackers, because they are not going to shoot that blood sugar up and then shoot up your insulin reaction. So you're looking for whole food carbohydrates that are starchy and trying to minimize, and I'm not saying never eat them, although someone might decide to do that. I'm saying that the frequency that you're doing that has to be less than the frequency of eating the whole food. You can have a white potato, and that's not going to shoot your blood sugar up as high and cause that insulin reaction as if you were having a whole wheat bread, for instance, all right? Unless it's 100% whole wheat, that would be a better choice. But anything made into a flour is going to be, your new operating system is minimizing those type of foods and eating more of whole foods, especially the starchy carbs, without cutting them out completely. All right. And by doing that, you're going to control the insulin and not having it be at a chronic high level, because the blood sugar isn't at a chronic high level. And then you're going to pull that down. Then cortisol and the testosterone versus the estrogen levels only have two factors and not the third one. And that's going to help. That's a significant factor in helping to reduce the belly fat. All right. Now, we also want to reduce the cortisol, because if we can reduce that, even if you're eating these foods that are high insulin producing, that would be helpful. And so stress management techniques, putting apps on your phone that have 8-minute or 5-minute meditations that you can hit when you're, really stressed and that you're producing all this cortisol, but there's no end to that in sight. Doing breathing exercises, extended exhales, longer exhales, shorter inhales. I usually tell people 2 count in and a 6 count out. Now you're turning on your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the calm down part of the nervous system, and you're going to decrease that cortisol. All right. So we have to work on decreasing the insulin, and that is directly related to the eating. And as a postmenopausal female, you've got to start finding recipes and snacks of choice so that the starchy carbs that you're eating, and you need to eat them, are whole foods, and they're going to be the least blood sugar spiking and the least insulin provoking. You control that, you're going to have a very significant behavioral medicine technique for reducing belly fat. All right. And then secondarily, working on lowering the cortisol with a variety of stress release techniques. Now you're lowering the cortisol and the insulin together. And that is even a more powerful, like a 1-2 punch on eliminating and not causing a resupply of belly fat. All right, everybody, thank you for listening to this episode. This is episode number 2 in, how to manage a postmenopausal female body to be optimal and not have to feel like you have to spend the rest of your life with the belly fat and the other states of being that I'm addressing in this series. So if you're enjoying this, please hit like, please hit subscribe, please go to my Your Second 50 platform, because I have a library, a growing library of research and information and exercise videos and mini courses and these type 15, 20-minute podcast type things, all information geared towards over 50 men and women. Check that out. It is a very, very valuable platform to put into your toolbox. That also includes 2 group coaching calls per month. Check that out. By going to the link that you're going to see at the end of this, and also that you saw in the middle. So please check that out. I hope to see you in the next episode. And then before I do, let's make our second 50 even better than our first 50. That is my goal. I hope it's your goal. I want to help you to achieve that goal. And I'll see you in the next video. And if you'd like to have access to some of my additional resources, I can be found at Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and on my website, www.judyterrell.com.